We have to figure out how to do that and how to introduce businesses in Michigan to other market segments that they haven't played in before. They have to understand how to price correctly. They have to understand what the quality requirements are and all their expectations. Good market research will help make that happen. And we've got some really wonderful partners that are helping us do that, like the MMTC, the National Center for Manufacturing Science right here in Ann Arbor, the Small Business and Technology Development Center, and others who are helping us help companies figure out where these market opportunities are. And the list goes on. So we've put together this toolkit that we think represents the best way possible for us to economic garden. And oh, by the way, for those of you who are really passionate about your tax credit programs and the brownfield tax credits and historic tax credits and all those things, we still have $125 million in cash available to do those deals, no longer in tax credits. So we can actually put the money where it can have the greatest impact up front, right? I talk to businesses all the time who, if they had $1 million to get a new power substation built, they could get the power substation built, and that would allow them to have reliable power and grow their plant or their business. When they get a tax credit that's worth $5 million over 10 years, it doesn't quite have the same kind of impact for them. So we're trying to structure our incentives in the form of cash to be placed at a point where businesses can have the highest impact, as opposed to offering tax credits that go on for long periods of time. Now we have on our books right now, the state, tax credits that go out through 2032, about 20 years out. They amount to nearly $8 billion of liability that your kids and your grandkids and probably your great-grandkids might be paying off. And there was no real accountability for how it was being awarded. And MEDC was the guilty party that way. We now have tremendous accountability, tremendous transparency in what we're doing, and we think we're putting the dollars where they can have the greatest impact. So our 4 C's, culture, commitment, capability, cultivation, that's how we're reinventing this way that we're working with businesses. And all indications is that we're on the right track. I mean, we're getting incredible engagement from the business community. And this Pure Michigan brand is something that I think is the primary way of approaching it. So what I've just given you is kind of our way of selling the Pure Michigan brand to the business community, the community that we're trying to engage in a serious way. Thank you.
Mr. Finney, it's good to see you guys. David, just help us out. How do you interface with what he's doing?
How do I interface with what Mike and the...
You've got to work these microphones very close. Yeah, right. Really close to it. There you go.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Well, I like to always tell people that IT is just an enabler for our partners, our agencies, the MEDC, to reach their business goals. So what we do is we work with Mike's team. We're a support with Mike as they work out with companies throughout the world. I work very closely with Gary Leroy, the CIO for the MEDC. I carpool with Mike sometimes, right? So we talk a lot. And with his team, Elizabeth and Amy. And so what we do is we just enable Mike and his team to be successful. And we just try to be the best business partners we can using IT.
All right, Mr. Finney, let's start out with a question on infrastructure. As you look at selling Michigan elsewhere, does our infrastructure bother you at all, sir?
No, actually, I think we have a tremendous amount of very high quality infrastructure that's in place that, because we've gone through major downsizing over the past decade or so, particularly in the manufacturing sector, it's not difficult for us to identify first-class facilities and other resources that businesses can literally move into today. I mean, one of the better examples is A123 Systems. They now have 3 facilities here in Southeast Michigan. You go to their facilities, you think these are brand new buildings. And and we see that all over the state. We see it in the northern part of the state. We see it in Southeast Michigan. We see it in the western part of the state. Our infrastructure is in pretty good shape. That's not one of the major hurdles that we have.
I'm sort of thinking infrastructure in terms of roads. Have you ever driven on a Michigan road?
I have.
Are you comfortable?
No, I think it's fair to say that we need to continue to invest in our basic infrastructure, roads, bridges. Hopefully we'll be building a new bridge at some point. We need to invest in that. There's no doubt about it. And from community to community, the quality of roads vary. And it's a never-ending battle because of this climate that we live in. And it makes it very challenging for our local communities to keep roads up to date and, frankly, for the state.
Will it take new revenue to do that?
You know, I don't know that I have an answer for that. I would probably want to punt that question to Kurt Steidel, who's not here right now. But I honestly just don't have an answer for you.
Well, how about we punt that to the governor, because he's got a message coming up on it in a couple of weeks. Hasn't he talked to you about raising new revenue to repair the roads to attract businesses?
Well, I don't want to get out ahead of the governor in terms of what his messages are.
The problem is I do. Can you give us a hint, though?
Well, I don't want to. I don't want to get out ahead of the governor and talk about anything that might be in his infrastructure message. Whether he's considering, modifying the way we collect fees and other things for roads and bridges and the core infrastructure, I think that's a message that he needs to deliver. It's not for me, and I really don't have a clue with respect to where he's going to go with it.
Okay, question here.
Yeah, Mike and Dave, welcome back to town. I think it's indicative of how sharp you guys are, and that you figured out how to be the last panel on a Friday afternoon, so that you don't have much far to drive on a Friday. Good for you. I also applaud everything that you're doing, and I know you're doing great work in Lansing. The question I have, though, is that over the course of today, we heard a lot about negatives. We heard about how our personal property taxes are jeopardizing the way local governments are going to operate, and if we eliminate those, what's going to happen to local governments and the ability to pay for police and fire. We heard that education is suffering and class sizes are high, and the services in schools have deteriorated, and funding for schools has been cut. Higher education is suffering, and the support has gone away, and people are having to pay more for tuition. So you have all these things going on, and Mike, you're in marketing, and we're told here this morning that all of these things make us non-competitive with other states, and when people are looking to move here, they're going to bypass us because of these kinds of problems. Now, you're showing that we have lots of assets in this state. Do these things inhibit your ability? And if so, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting list of all the challenges that we have in front of us. First of all, I think we need to realize that this state, for too many years, simply ignored the fact that it was not able to pay its bills. And so we continued to find creative ways to balance budgets, and eventually it caught up with us. It caught up with us now. And frankly, I respect the fact that this governor and this legislature decided that they would fix the structural budget deficit problem that we've had for year after year after year after year. It sends an incredible message to businesses. I was with the president of U.S. Steel just yesterday, and he talked about, the kind of certainty that businesses feel when states are on financial solid ground, for one. And so Michigan, for the first time in many years, is clearly on solid financial ground as a state. By getting the state on solid financial ground, I think that actually positions all of our local units of government and other taxing jurisdictions, schools or otherwise, to actually be in a much better position going forward. And so, yeah, we're feeling pain as a state because of all the changes that had to be made in order to get to a balanced budget. But I think over the long haul, if we do our jobs right, businesses will continue to invest in this state. Jobs will increase in this state, and that's how you will ultimately allow state and local governments, school districts, and other taxing jurisdictions to continue to grow and prosper. The other thing to point out is that other states have been in the exact same condition that Michigan is in. This economic crisis that we had, while Michigan was in fact in a difficult position because the auto industry and manufacturing in particular hit us extremely hard, most other states have been hit pretty hard as well. And so we're all challenged. And all units of government at every level is challenged right now in terms of our financial resources. But I think we did the right thing as a state to get our financial house in order, and we just have to continue to work with local units of government and school districts to try and do the same.
Question
And
here.
let me add on to that too, though, because I've been going around the state. You know, I have a long history in local government, right? I see a lot of familiar faces out there: Verna, Ed, you know, Representative Ouimet, you know, and I've been talking to a lot of local governments now, and the opportunity now has never been better for them to look at how they can collaborate and work together. And it's struck me as I go around the state of Michigan, most of the local units, at least around the IT side and the support services side, are actually looking at this as a great opportunity to streamline the way they do business. And the state of Michigan's leading that way, I think, in many ways. You know, you see what Washtenaw County and City of Ann Arbor have done, just around IT, for example, shared data center, you know, dispatch, you know, centralized dispatch, sharing staff. You're seeing that conversation now happen all around the state. Some of it's out of necessity, don't mishear me. But the fact of the matter is, I think we're going to be providing as good a service as we have before. And I think it's a great opportunity now. So I don't want to call it a crisis, but crisis breeds opportunity. And I think the state of Michigan, local governments, and education institutions are taking hold of that.
I'd like to address the question about whether we need more money for roads and bridges. And I do serve on the governor's work group on infrastructure, and I also joined Mr. Finney in not scooping the governor on what he's going to say on 24th or 25th this month, I believe, in his special message on infrastructure. But I can report to you the findings of a small work group of Representative Roy Schmidt and myself as a part of the House Transportation Committee. We were charged to take a look at, take a fresh, objective, independent look at what the Transportation Funding Task Force had come out with. Their findings for what we needed more revenue for our roads and bridges. They came out with that in 2008. And the simple truth is, unless we have more revenue, the condition of our roads in particular are going to drop dramatically. So we worked for months and months on a study with a whole lot of technical analysts, and we came up with the number that the minimum amount of money that we will need to maintain our roads and bridges at desirable levels is at least $1.4 billion more revenue. We really came down to the conclusion that it's the old oil change ad, pay me now or pay me more later, that if we are not willing to spend at least $1.4 billion more dollars, then we need to be ready to spend a heck of a lot more in the future. So that's the result of independent studies. So I think the simple American common sense is that we better be ready to dig into our pockets and pay sooner than later.
Did I just hear you endorse a revenue increase for the roads?
I certainly do. I just will not say exactly which way we should do it, but we will need $1.4 billion more revenue.
All right, very good. Questions from the audience? All right, Mr. Finney, you mentioned in your remarks the manufacturing, that we don't want to lose that in Michigan. What is the right balance, percentage-wise, of major manufacturing versus services, other stuff, percentage-wise?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a percentage, Tim. The manufacturing has such a high multiplier effect in terms of the trickle down. One manufacturing job equates to about 7 additional jobs that trickle down in the economy. So you really want as many of those as you can possibly get. What we want to make sure that we do is balance that across multiple sectors. So we could be the world's largest life sciences region if we wanted to, or if we really decide to put resources into it by manufacturing medical devices as one example. We've taken on the battery sector in a big way. So there are other sectors in manufacturing that will allow us to maintain a reasonable balance in our state. But manufacturing jobs have an incredible value overall to a state. And so we want to have as many as we can. We just want to make a variety of different things in addition to cars.